Let's get the latest now from New York with our correspondent, Sherwin Bryce Pease. Sherwin, a very good afternoon to you. Talk to us about this exciting day. Of course, we spoke to Trafalgar Square earlier on. We want to know about the turnout, as well as the readiness of the polling stations, as well as the numbers of the South Africans that have come out to exercise their democratic rights in New York.
Well, Alicia, I think we're into the hundreds here in New York. Certainly since they opened this morning at 7 a.m. local time, there has been a steady flow of enthusiastic South African voters. In fact, there is a couple that just arrived that are probably voting behind me as I speak to you right now, that landed from the British Virgin Islands on Thursday specifically to come and vote at the nearest polling station to them here in New York City. But of course, Washington, D.C. also underway. I was told by the acting ambassador there earlier that about 54 people had voted there, and the Consul General in Los Angeles has just texted me to say they're about to open. They will open in the next hour at 6 a.m. there. They open at 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. But certainly a great deal of enthusiasm from the voters here. I was chatting to them earlier. I'm not sure if you've seen those Vox Pops that we sent earlier, but we chatted to some of the voters about the issues that are front and center and front of mind to them. And they talked about the NIH bill. That was something that came up a lot. Many people unhappy with the passage of that legislation, which was signed into law by President Cyril Ramaphosa earlier this week. People talked about load shedding, which was a big issue. They talked about infrastructure concerns. Crime was mentioned as a big issue. And a lot of the voters here are telling me that they were voting for change. So a wide variety of issues that are front and center to different voters here. And I chatted earlier with Professor Sean Jacobs, who is a professor of international relations at the New School in New York. And I asked him about how the chips might fall in this election. As you well know, Alicia, we have established parties, the African National Congress, the official opposition, the Democratic Alliance, the third largest party in South Africa, the Economic Freedom Fighters. And then you also have the new kids on the block, right? You've got Rise Mzansi, you've got Build One South Africa, you've got the MK party that has former President Jacob Zuma as the face of that party. This is what Sean Jacobs had to say about how the chips may fall. Watch.
All right, we're definitely going to have that clip in a short while. But Sherwin, I just want to know from you how this process actually is being conducted. We were just having a conversation earlier yesterday about the fact that the voters are actually going to present themselves at their preferred voting stations. And then the IEC will then seal those ballots and send it back to Pretoria for official counting. Why wasn't this done electronically, do you know?
Well, the process is manual. Voting has been manual in South Africa since 1994. What's different for voters abroad, they only vote in the national election, so they vote for a party that will represent them in the National Assembly, that subsequently then votes for the president. In addition to that, the process here is twofold. They get the ballot, they make their mark, they have to put the ballot folded up into envelope A. They then seal envelope A. Envelope A then goes into a second envelope on which they have to put their name, their ID number, and the district at which they voted. Now, a number of voters behind me have raised concerns about why they need to put their name and their ID on essentially, something that is going to essentially reveal their ballot. And they've been assured by the IEC officials here that is only for due process in Pretoria. Once these ballots have been shipped to Pretoria for counting, the first envelope will be discarded and then the second envelope will be processed and counted in Pretoria. Counting does not happen in voting stations in the United States. It will only happen in Pretoria. So a little bit of a different process. Voters will vote provincially in South Africa and for the national poll, but only national voting happening in New York and admissions around the world.
Sherwin, understand now we do have, of course, that clip that you were referring to earlier on. But before you link us to that, I just want you to quickly talk to us about the observer missions that have actually been assigned to these polls and what, of course, some of their duties have been throughout the course of voting today.
Yeah, well, so essentially voting happens at South African missions, so at embassies and at consulates around the world. The United States is unique, perhaps, to some other countries in that we have 3 stations around the country, one on the West Coast in Los Angeles and 2 on the East Coast, one in D.C. at the embassy in Washington, D.C. and here in Manhattan. We are on the 10th floor. This is where the South African consulate building is located in central Manhattan. People arrive in the lobby downstairs. They are met by IEC, South African consulate officials that are doubling now as IEC officials. They will then check their ID documents to make sure that they are registered. They're then sent up to the 10th floor. They are then verified. Their names are then crossed off the voters' roll. They will then get an ink, a mark on their thumb to indicate that they voted. They then get a ballot. They're explained the 2-envelope process. They go into a booth behind me. They vote. And they deliver their ballot into the ballot box behind me. You correctly mentioned that I talked to Professor Sean Jacobs about how the chips might fall in this election. This is what he said.
My suspicion is the ANC will probably still get the majority, well, the plurality of the votes. So they probably, most people suggest, most surveys, most observers say they'll get something between just about 40% up to like 47%. That the DA will get stuck at its usual 20% and the EFF 10 to 15. But then you have parties like Rise Mzansi, who I think is chipping away. My sense is they chipping away at the Democratic Alliance to support professional classes, upwardly mobile, people who used to be supporting the DA who might feel uncomfortable with some of the positions and public pronouncements of the DA might find a home in Rise Mzansi. And then I think younger people who are products of like Fees Must Fall, Rose Must Fall. I think they'll find a home in the EFF. And then you think of someone like Jacob Zuma's MK party. That's most indications are after all the sort of coverage in the beginning. That's a regional party that is mostly confined to KwaZulu-Natal.
Interesting reviews indeed. In closing, Sherwin, what time will, of course, voting close, and when will those ballots actually be landing in Pretoria? Sorry to cut you off there, Sherwin.
I was just saying, Alicia, that in the last election abroad, the Democratic Alliance achieved about 75% of the votes cast in missions around the world. So let's see if that plays itself out again in this election, 2024.
And I was asking, Sherwin, so what time will voting close today, and when should we expect those ballots to make a landfall or landing out in Pretoria?
Well, 12 hours in Los Angeles from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. Pacific time. In New York, it's from 7 a.m. this morning, so we're underway now for about a few hours. And voting will close here at 9 p.m. Eastern time tonight, about 3 a.m. South African time. And then immediately there is a service provider that will come and collect a secure courier bag, and that will be shipped to the IEC in Pretoria. And my understanding is, but check with the IEC on this, is that they will count those ballots once everyone has voted on the 29th of May, and then those will be collected and put together with the opening of and counting of ballots in South Africa.